When I open up someone's birth chart, there's a technique that I use that I don't hear a lot of other astrologers talking about, at least in modern pop astrology, and I want to teach it to you today. It's called hemisphere emphasis or hemisphere dominance. Hi, my name is Hailey. I'm the Virgo God Mother. I have been studying astrology for almost 6 years now, a little bit longer than that, but formally 5 or 6 years. I studied under a mentor who studied under Noel Till, so I followed the humanistic psychological bend of astrology. But I started initially learning Hellenistic and more traditional astrology as my base foundational knowledge. So I combine and blend the two, and I have a very open mind when it comes to astrology. Anyway, hemisphere emphasis. So it's very simple, and it can suggest a lot about a person just using this very simple technique. You just look at the chart and you see where all the planets are. You just see where all the glyphs happen to be in the chart. Your birth chart is a wheel, and we can divide it up into 4 hemispheres. So the bottom hemisphere is going to be like just the bottom of the chart is your northern hemisphere. The left side of the chart is an eastern hemisphere. The top side of the chart is a southern hemisphere, and the right side is a western hemisphere. You might ask, why is the south on top and why is the north on the bottom? That is because your birth chart is oriented to where the sun rises and falls. So it rises in the east, so that's going to be the left side of the chart. That's your ascendant. It goes up through the south, and it's going to set in the western part of your chart. So that's why the right side is west. And then north is on the bottom. That's the best explanation I got. If I'm wrong, correct me in the comments. Now let's go through what each hemisphere means. So if you have a northern hemisphere, that means the majority of your planets are clustered towards the bottom of your chart, like in this example here, then that suggests that there's something about your childhood that you are still stuck on. Something about your childhood has stayed with you into adulthood, and it requires a lot of sorting through psychologically. Something about the trauma you experienced or the experiences you had made it so that it carried on into adulthood and you feel stuck on it. Usually people with a northern hemisphere have a lot of work to do as far as untangling what happened to them when they were children, and often they need to do this work before they're able to fully progress or reach their potential as an adult. Something about what happened in the past still has a grip on you today, and it's something you have to work through, is the overall theme of a northern hemisphere. If you have an eastern hemisphere, the eastern hemisphere is when you have the majority of your planets on the left side of the chart, as shown in this example. This suggests someone who is defensive. This suggests someone who, again, probably rooted in the childhood or being a young person, had to defend themselves, perhaps as a coping mechanism. People with eastern hemispheres also tend to be pretty independent and pretty self-reliant. Again, formed because of something that happened when you were a child or as a teenager. It's funny because when I read a chart and I suggest that someone has a defensive lean because they have an eastern hemisphere, I have gotten a few, no I don't, I'm not defensive. And look, I get it, I have an eastern hemisphere too, so like, I'm not defensive, you're defensive. But that's an eastern hemisphere. A southern hemisphere, so when your planets are all on the top side of your chart, like shown in this example here, means that you struggle to ground, you struggle to find your tether with the earth. And this could be because when you were a kid, you moved around a lot, you did not have a stable housing situation, or maybe housing was always up in the air, you had to go in the hospital. Any number of things can contribute to why someone feels like they can't ground. But ultimately, a southern hemisphere suggests someone who really struggles to find places of rest that feel safe. It can suggest someone who feels that they're on edge all the time or really has a hard time identifying where home is. Anyone with a southern hemisphere, I strongly recommend they have some sort of grounding practice, whether that be yoga, meditation, just being present, whatever the case may be. That's the southern hemisphere. And a western hemisphere, as shown in this example here, is when the majority of your planets happen to fall on the right side of your chart. This suggests someone who gives himself away to others too easily. Someone who takes care of other people's needs before they take care of their own. And ultimately, someone who doesn't know how to fill their own cup. They are too preoccupied with filling other people's cups. This can happen for a variety of reasons. This can happen because when you were a kid, maybe you were parentified, you had to take care of the adults around you, or you had to take care of your other siblings. This could be you were never taught to take care of yourself and you just learn to take care of others. You could feel guilty for taking care of yourself. There's a number of reasons how and why a Western Hemisphere may manifest. But the overall theme of Western Hemisphere is someone who struggles to take care of themselves and prefers to take care of others. So a couple notes here. Usually hemisphere emphases are not super clean. So you might have a northern and an eastern hemisphere. You might have a northern and a western hemisphere. You might have a southern and a western. You might have a southern and an eastern. So it can take on many forms. Usually that just speaks to the full experience of what happened when you were younger, that gave you this psychological bend today. So for example, if you have a northern and an eastern hemisphere, maybe you had a really traumatic childhood, maybe a lot of things went down, and as a result, you became really self-reliant and defensive because you weren't around supportive adults when you were a kid. Same thing for southern and western. Perhaps you moved around a lot. Perhaps there was a lot of things that went on when you were a child. You didn't have a stable living situation and you had to take care of the adults around you, or you feel like you had to be responsible for other people's emotions at an early age. Another note, if you have any retrograde planets, that counts for the opposite side of the chart. So if you have a retrograde planet on the left side of your chart, that actually counts for the right, so that would count for a Western Hemisphere emphasis. And then same thing top and bottom, if you have a retrograde planet on the top of your chart, that would count towards Northern emphasis. I use all the planets, I don't use the nodes when considering hemisphere emphasis. I don't work a lot with asteroids, but I'd be curious if you do and you look at charts and you start using this technique, what you find. I'd be curious to know. And then if you're someone who doesn't have a particular emphasis in your chart, the planets are kind of evenly spaced out, and you don't have any retrograde planets, it's just kind of all over the place, then this just isn't really a technique that I would use in looking at your chart, or it just doesn't have as much weight as it would if they were all clustered in one spot. It might just mean that you have a lot of balance in that regard, or it could suggest that you don't really know what direction to go in. I would also like to note, I don't mean any of these interpretations in a judgmental way. I just mean them in like an objective point of view way. I think of astrology as an objective view of a subjective experience. So I don't necessarily think that these experiences or these suggestions about who you are good or bad. They just are, and it's just something to work through so that we can become our highest selves and that we don't have to suffer as much. Because you can't change something if you don't identify it. You can't change something if you aren't aware of it, or you can't work with the energy that you were born with if you don't know what energy you got going on. So if it seems like I'm negative or that I'm not offering the positive side of what a hemisphere emphasis means, it's not unintentional. I'm not saying that these bends are positive or negative in any way. They just are what they are. It is what it is. But to some, this is something that I look at when I look at people's charts for the first time. It's wildly accurate in most cases. Most people really resonate with it. If you're new to astrology, I wouldn't put too much emphasis on hemisphere emphasis. It's something cool and accurate, but it is not necessarily the core of who you are. It's just something that suggests something about your psychological leaning. And that's all I got. I'm the Virgo Godmother. If you like this video, then like it. If you want to see more videos like this, then please subscribe. I'm also on Instagram and TikTok if you want to follow me there. And the link for the astrological program that I use is down below in the description. That's where I pulled all the screenshots for the charts you saw today. And if you have any questions about the content of this video, please drop me a comment below. Or if you want to talk about your own hemisphere emphasis, I'd be curious to hear about it. If you use asteroids, I'd also be curious to hear if you think that they show up in a hemisphere dominance sort of way. Thank you so much, and I really appreciate it. Bye-bye.